Hey everybody. So I'm just going to show you how I, without a sequencer, or at least without using a sequencer I should say, used my nibblers and the div skip, along with some utilities and some quality of life things, to create a song kind of inspired by the Dave Brubeck Rondo a la Turk. So this is what it sounds like. We'll bring in the kick. If you recognize Rondo a la Turk, this should already be kind of familiar to you. Then we'll bring in the hi-hat. And then finally we'll bring in the lead. And this is where it's most dissimilar. And we can play around a little bit. Have some fun. And then we can use the atom to bring in some variation. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm going to be showing you how we make today. All right, so let's try to create this patch from scratch. I'm going to, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to skip the item parts of it, just because though it makes cool variations, it's not essential to the core part of the patch. But before we understand how this patch works, let's talk about how the song works. Blue Rondo a la Turk is one of the most famous examples of what musicologists call additive meters. It's also, you may have heard the term ACSAC, but basically the idea of additive meter is that rather than dividing a measure into some number of beats evenly, they're clustered into unequal groupings of beats. So Blue Rondo a la Turk is in 9/8, and rather than it just being 9 straight pulses or something, it's grouped into 3 groups of 2 pulses and 1 group of 3 pulses. That repeats 3 times, and then you get one measure where you have 3 groups of 3 beats. And the effect of this is it kind of creates this stumbling quality. It feels almost like an extra beat is inserted in each of the measures because your ear kind of wants to hear it in 8 or something like that. The extra beat kind of makes it feel like it stumbles. And if you watch, say, Turkish dances for these ACSAC folk songs, you'll actually see the dances have this kind of reeling quality to them. So I was playing with the nibbler and experimenting with different patterns of gates at the carry output when I had different sets of add set. And I started writing some of them down, and I noticed something interesting about the add 9 pattern and the add 11 pattern. And they look like this. And something might jump out at you right away. These are both, I'm just looking at the first 9 beats of these patterns, and if I invert them, well, look what we have here. We have 3 sets of 2 beats and 1 set of 3 beat for add 9, and then for add 11 we have 3 sets of 3 beats. So these are the rhythmic patterns to create the additive meter of Blue Rondo a la Turk. So I thought, well, can I patch this up? So let's try it. So the first thing I need to do is I need a clock divider that's going to, well, first thing I need is a clock. So I'll take a clock, I'll patch it into a mult so we can use it all over the place. And then I'll take that clock and I'll patch it into a clock divider. Here I'm just using the fantastic div skip, which makes it really, really easy to divide a bunch of clocks at once, do lots of cool things to them. I have the first clock divider set to 9 and the second clock divider set to 4. Why 4? Well, if I take the output, and I'm going to mult this because I know I'm going to need it, of the 9 and plug it into the 4, what that will allow me to do is that will say every 4th time that I count to 9, I can do something different. This gate will go high. And specifically, every 4th measure every fourth counting to 9, I'll switch between the add 9 and the add 11 patterns. And that's one of the really neat things about Nibbler, is not that you can just generate these cool gate patterns, but also that you can switch between them programmatically. So let's take the output of that clock, of that divide by 9 clock, and I'll send that into the reset of the Nibbler, which will mean that it'll only play these first 9 notes of the pattern. And then I'll take the clock and send it into, well, you guessed it, the clock of Nibbler. Now, this will produce, remember, the inverted version of this pattern. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the carry output of the Nibbler, and I'm going to pass it into just a logic module that I'm simply using to invert the pattern. And then I'll take the output of that and send it into, oops, that's not out, the inverted version. I'll take the inverted version and I'll send it into the kick. And let's listen to what we are going to hear now. You should recognize that. Dun, 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 dun. That's the Blue Rondo a la Turk pattern. So now, that's great, but that's not the only pattern that Blue Rondo a la Turk plays. So whenever this divide by 4 goes high, let's have that switch the pattern on the Nibbler by adding 2 more to the pattern by passing this gate into the gate 2 of Nibbler, which will essentially make it add by 11 rather than add by 9. And now let's listen to the pattern. You're just hearing the accent it beats. So let's take the clock and send that into like a hi-hat pattern so we can hear every beat. Let's turn up the speed a little bit. It's pretty cool. And you could even bring variation into it by like changing the Nibbler, hitting the Nibbler reset, changing it from subtract instead of add. And then the neat thing is, because we're resetting everything and we're controlling its position, it'll always fall back into the pattern eventually. The last piece of the puzzle here is if we take the clock and then also send it into one other Nibbler to get a little bit of melody information. So we'll send it into this clock. And then we'll take, say, its stepped value out. We'll send that into another channel of, oh, by the way, this is the Landscape Noom, purely passive drum synth. Very, very cool. We should get a little bit of a melody. And we can play with the settings of this as well. And there you have it. We've just created a Blue Rondo a la Turk variation, or a song inspired by Blue Rondo a la Turk, only using math and bit math specifically from the Nibbler and a little bit of smart clock dividing. I think that's pretty cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed this and you learned something. Have a great day.